Thanks for joining our first Outbrain DigiTalk. This will be the first in a series that will cover various topics relating to content marketing. So do keep an eye open, and we will be hosting these on the Guardian website. Before I hand over to Alex for an introduction on the subject we're covering today, just a few housekeeping notes. Alex and Michael will take questions at the end of the session, so do make sure you type in your questions. Feel free to type them as you go, and we will review them all at the end. Also, a recording of the webinar will be taken and will be available afterwards, and we will make sure to circulate the link to that to everybody should you want to look at the slides again later. And at the end of the presentation, you'll see contact details, so if you do want to get in touch with either Michael or Alex afterwards and you have more specific questions, feel free to do so. So I will hand over to Alex Cheeseman from Outbrain, who will kickstart this discussion.
Thanks, Antonia. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the this afternoon session. Today we're going to be talking about how to look and measure for your content marketing ROI. My name's Alex. I head up the brands and agencies team for Outbrain in the UK. A little bit about me. My background is predominantly travel, startup, and content. Recently, here at Outbrain, we work with most of the top tier 200 brands, helping them at various levels across the kind of content marketing landscape. So today we will provide you with an overview of what to look for in your content marketing efforts, and we'll leave you with a framework and hopefully a business case that you can start to measure your content marketing more effectively. That's all from me initially. I'm going to pass you over to Michael, who's going to introduce himself and then kick things off.
Great, thanks, Alex. And hello, everyone. Wherever you are in the world, let me just say good morning, good evening, or good afternoon for those of you in the European time zones. Real honor and pleasure for us to be presenting to you today. Quick introduction of myself, as you can see that awkward-looking picture there. I am the head of strategy for NewsCred, one of the leading content marketing providers in the industry. I joined here in June, so almost coming up on 6 months. Prior to that, I spent about 7 years with SAP, leading enterprise software company, most recently as the head of content marketing for the company. And in that journey, I reached out to a number of different people, thought leaders, experts, and those who I thought were doing content marketing really well, and learned many of the tips and tricks and made a lot of mistakes certainly along the way. And one of the biggest questions that we always received is, what is the ROI of content marketing? How can we measure this and show real business value? And what I can tell you without any doubt is that those that are doing content marketing well are showing not just return on their investment, but they're showing significantly higher return on their marketing investment as compared to some of their other initiatives. So we're going to walk through some of those things. Alex is going to provide a model, and we're going to get into some of that here. So let me just get right into it. My job here is to start with some of the context. This is the world we live in, right? We're marketers, or in some way or shape or form, we're all involved in the business of marketing. And yet, if you ask your mother or your children or your friends what marketing is, they will undoubtedly tell you it's something like this. It's a banner, it's a billboard, it's an ad. And yet, when I went to university, there were 4 P's in marketing, not just promotion. And so I would argue that marketing has a marketing problem. Not only are we perceived as being only one thing that is a small part of a larger thing, but the world at large doesn't fully understand what it is that we're trying to do. And so we'll talk a little bit about what that is here in a moment. So we all live in this world that has changed relatively rapidly in a very short period of time. LinkedIn, the first social network, is only 11 years old, and think about the massive changes that this has brought in our world. The way that we consume and share and now even create content, and just look at the volumes. 200 million pieces of content are shared every single day. 1.8 billion photos uploaded and shared. This stat, 400 million Snapchats, it's only about 3 months old, but it's actually now 700 million Snapchats are sent every single day, and 500 million tweets are posted. So you can see just the volume of content is just absolutely massive. As you move on to the next slide, you can see that what's happening, we as content consumers are tuning out all of this noise. 5,000 marketing messages a day. This is a stat according to the Nielsen company, along with Jan Kulovich, did some research. And this is up from just over 2,000 only 10 years ago. So we've gone from 2,000 marketing messages in front of each and every one of us every single day to 5,000 messages. Clearly, we as individuals, as human beings, can't consume and perceive and even absorb this kind of messaging. So marketing has a marketing problem. 90% of the email that we send is unopened. 44% of the direct mail that we deliver to households is never open. Banner ads, 0.01% of banner ads are never clicked on. And yet, we know that brands are successful at allowing people to fall in love with some of the things that they're saying. We fall in love with what matters. When we have a problem, we focus in. We follow, like, recommend, and share the things that we care about, the things that are bothering us in that moment. And so we know that brands are capable of connecting with their audience through stories that they love. So just quickly, a very, very basic definition of content marketing, this one according to the Content Marketing Institute. Content marketing seeks to attract, not buy, an audience. Great content starts by educating or entertaining your audience, not interrupting the content they seek to become more informed or engaged. So we trust the brands that are able to deliver these kinds of content experiences to us. And we know that great content can deliver real ROI. 67% of companies with an active blog report more leads. Another stat. Using content-driven tactics saves an average of 13% in overall cost per lead. 82% of marketers who blog see positive ROI for their content-driven marketing efforts. And then this stat is something that I love. Craig Davis is a former chief creative officer at JWT and Saatchi and has gone on to try to save the world. But back when he helped build these colossal advertising empires, made this great quote that we need to stop interrupting what people are interested in and be what people are interested in. And I think that really serves as an apt mission statement or vision for what content marketing is trying to accomplish. This is the visual that I use to try to define content marketing. It's the gap between what brands publish and what our customers are looking for. So think about that. On the left-hand side, what brands publish. This is our natural instinct as a business to talk about ourselves, to promote ourselves, to talk about why we're better, why we're different. And yet that's almost exactly what our customers are not looking for. They're often looking for understanding their problem. They're looking for being entertained. They're looking to forget their problem. They're looking to move along in a storytelling journey that brands often don't deliver on. So content marketing is the overlap between what brands are looking for and our natural instinct, and complete charity on the other side of just delivering what customers want without any connection to the brand. So content marketing sits in the middle. It's this overlap where brands publish stories that people want, stories that are helpful, stories that are entertaining, and our customers, our audience, is consuming that. So we know great marketing is great storytelling. Great marketing has always been about great storytelling because it's the storytelling, it's the emotional connection that allows us to reach, engage, and convert the audience that we're looking to reach. Content marketing connects brands with their audience through the stories and proves value to the business, and that's what we're going to talk about now. Content marketing is all the marketing that's left. This is a quote from Seth Godin after he published his book, All Marketers Are Liars / Tell Stories. And he was interviewed on this book by David Meerman Scott, who's one of the co-founders at HubSpot. And he said, Seth, it's really amazing that we were able to see this trend, this huge, massive shift from paid promotion into content marketing before that term was even really utilized. And Seth actually said back in 2008, well, what's content marketing? And David Meerman Scott defined it as the things that Seth has been talking about, permission-based marketing and storytelling. And Seth's response in the interview at this time in 2008 was, if that's content marketing, then that's all the marketing that's left. And we know that the buyer journey has changed. 60 up to 60%, and now Serious Decisions is saying that as much as 80% of the buyer journey has shifted to self-directed search. So we as content consumers are going out, we're trying to understand what the problems are, what the solutions are, who the vendors are, and what makes them different. 60 to 80% of that buyer journey is complete before they reach out to us, largely to just understand what's our pricing and send me a contract. So the ability to create relationships along that journey has shifted to early stage content, to the kinds of things that we're looking for earlier in the buying journey. A couple of depressing stats here to really set the stage for how to get this done. 60 to 70% of the marketing content that your organization creates goes completely unused. 62% of business decision makers find the content that they are consuming completely useless. And the shelf life of a piece of content shared on social networks is just 6 hours. So think about how long it takes you to create a white paper or a research report or even a blog. 6 hours, the ROI goes to completely negative. And now I'm going to shift over to Alex, who's going to provide a model for how to measure ROI.
Thanks for setting the scene, Michael. So before we dive down and actually look at how to measure, we need to take a look at a step before, just to better understand how we can get our audience into the content that we've got. I'm just going to turn over to the next slide. So I want to talk a little bit about distribution, and fundamentally, this is an area that a lot of brands historically haven't focused on. We see an awful lot of brands creating really amazing content, and often a lot of the budgets are used just around the creation. And when it comes to distribution, there's nothing left. So it's really, really important when you look at content marketing and you're looking at effective content marketing to make sure that you have enough budget and a strategy in place to ensure that your content gets in front of the right people. Hope is not a plan, and creating content that goes viral, it just doesn't happen. So you need to have a strategy in place. So over the next couple of slides, I'm just going to show you a very simplistic framework that we use to encourage effective distribution of content. So when you start off, it's critical that you focus not on how do I sell my customer something, but think about how can I add value to them? How can I create engagement with my customers? And this has to be at the heart of what you're doing. And once you have this, you need to figure out what are the most effective channels to help increase engagement and help ensure that enough of the right people are getting this value. So some of the areas you may want to look at are search. So within search, you have free, which is your SEO, and you have your CPC, or your pay-per-click, Google AdWords, etc. And this can help people discover your content. Another channel you might want to use is social. So you have your likes of Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter. With the recent algorithm changes in Facebook, you probably get a lot less free, but as a paid channel, it's a really great way to have your content discovered. You then want to look at other means like Outbrain that can help get your content discovered. And another area is CRM. So from a kind of simplistic view, these are 4 different channels that you can look at to help increase engagement and help get your content discovered. But you'll notice that each of these here are circled and separated out. And what we tend to see is that these groups are often siloed within an organization, which, if they're all after the same objectives, isn't potentially the best way to do business. Our recommendation is to have all of these teams talking with each other. And this will give you the first elements of the framework to understand, okay, these are the channels that I'm using to amplify my content. And now let's start to measure their success versus each other. And then you can start to understand what's delivering you the right business objectives. And then you can start to move the levers up or down on the channel that gives you the best results. But equally, it's really important, as I said before, to have these teams talking together because there's inherent value that will happen because of the activity you're doing. So what I mean by that is, if you start to create really great content, if more people see that content, then one of the things that we like to do as humans is to share that content. So what you'll then start to see is an increase in your social. Google, one of the latest algorithm updates they have, wants to encourage more content created for humans as opposed to machines. So if people are sharing content, that's a signal to Google. So you'll then start to see an increase in your SEO results. So when we go through this process here, not only think about all of the channels and how they can deliver better results, but also look at the different impact you can get from these different channels when they start working together. Have these people working in the same room, have them talking to each other. This is one of the number one ways we're seeing really great success with our clients. So we're now going to move on to the real heart of what we're here to talk about today, which is measurement. And just to set some expectations, there is no silver bullet. There's no one answer yet, and I think we still have a way in terms of figuring out ultimate attribution modeling. But some of the steps that I'm going to go through are going to create a framework that will allow you to at least create benchmarks and understand, well, this is doing better than that was in the past, etc. Before I do jump into this, one of the core learnings that I want to give you is that context is everything. It's really, really important when you look at some of these metrics to look at them in context. And what I mean by this is, for example, click-through rate. If you have a click-through rate of 5%, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Well, it really depends on A, how much money you've spent, but more importantly, if you have a click-through rate of 5%, but people are leaving your content after 2 seconds, that's a bad thing. The second is bounce rate. Bounce rate, when taken in isolation, it can be a good thing, it can be a bad thing. But if someone's come into your content and spent 5 or 6 minutes reading and engaging with it, that's a really good metric for you. So over the next few slides, I'm going to go through some specific metrics that you can use. But what's really important is to put context with them, so you're actually getting a true picture of your content marketing activity. I've created a really basic funnel to address the acquisition stage of the customer lifecycle. Naturally, if you wanted to complete the loop, you'd want to add in additional levels, for example, retention, advocacy, loyalty. But just for today's session, I focus on 3 distinct areas. I'm going to give you different metrics that can sit across these different areas that will allow you to benchmark your success. So what you want to be looking at is, which type of content should I be creating for my audience? And how does that perform against all of the various channels that I have? So the channels that I showed you before will sit across the top of this. Let's jump down into the first section, which is awareness. So awareness is all about reach. It's all about getting in front of enough people so that when they're coming ready to make a decision, you're on that list. So some of the metrics you may want to look at are traffic, impressions, unique visitors, people that have come to your site for the first ever time. But also what's very interesting is overlaying that with demographic data. What you'll tend to discover is that you'll have a variety of different demographics that are very interested in what you're doing, but they may want different types of content. For example, a younger person may want video content. A middle-aged person might want slightly longer form content. So overlaying the demographic data within this section can help you to really tailor your content strategy. Moving to the consideration phase. So within this phase here, you're on someone's radar. They're considering what they want to purchase. You're looking at helping them to solve a problem. So you'll probably want to start to deliver slightly different types of content that are perhaps more informative, slightly different styles. So some of the metrics you can use here to measure success, time spent on site, page views per sessions, how someone scrolls all the way down to the end of the content. Are they bouncing? And is that a good or a bad thing? And you may want to run a brand lift study. So showing somebody a piece of your content and then talking to a non-exposed group and understanding, is there a change in brand preference, favorability, intent to purchase? And the final stage is conversion. So outside of purely purchasing something, there's a lot of positive ROI factors that you can put in here to demonstrate and measure success. Things like signups, downloads, social sharing, understanding the customer journey, what type of content to show them within the awareness phase, how to shift them through to consideration and ultimately down through to a conversion. Once you've tagged your content up, and once you can measure all of these different formats, you can then understand which of the channels should I use to activate my consumers within each of the different stages, and what's the correct journey to get the business objectives that I want. I'm going to dive down very quickly down to 3 different types of content that you should be considering alongside each of the specific areas. So the first is owned content. And owned content should be at the heart of your content strategy, purely because this is where you'll own all of the data. So, for example, you may want to start looking at, what kind of content should I create if I'm an FMCG company to create awareness? this type of content will probably be slightly more general, and you'll want to look at what's the traffic, what's the audience that's coming into this. When you're looking at consideration, and you remember a while back I mentioned context, you may want to start combining click-through rate with traffic versus page views to start to give yourself a content engagement metric to understand, well, how did this piece of content perform versus another piece of content? And as I said before, mapping that through to drive the business objectives, whether that's a newsletter sign up, a site sign up, or a coupon download. Once again, you'll want to look at the paid media section. You want to understand, well, where does paid media play a role in my customer lifecycle? Should it be an awareness, consideration? Does it drive the conversion rates? Figuring this out, mapping the success of each piece of content, using the metrics that we've put here to build those benchmarks is the way that you can actually understand, well, paid media is driving incredible consideration for me. Let's invest more in this section. This is the type of content that works here for me. And equally as important is earned media. And a lot of people ignore the importance of earned media in their content marketing strategy. Earned media is great because it's trusted. It's somebody else saying you're great. So you should use these assets. Think about how they can support, drive through into all of the other activity that you've got. And once you have these data, once you have these points, once you understand the customer lifecycle, the content you should use, the channels you should use, the benchmarks that you've got so that you're measuring success, this is the very start of the journey. This isn't the end. This is where you'll use this data to begin to feed the loop. Use the analytics, you'll use the analysis to then go back to your content team and say, guys, this is the stuff that's working really well for us. We need to create more awareness. Here's the data. That'll feed into your insights and strategy. That then feeds into your creation and curation. And this is an endless loop that continues to go on and on. You can never stop. Content marketing is an always on strategy. So with that in mind, I'm now going to pass you over back to Michael, who's going to talk about how to build a business case for content marketing.
Great, thanks, Alex. That was great. So yeah, if you can get to the next slide, and I mentioned this when we got started, that for those that are measuring content marketing ROI, generally in almost every single case where we've seen it, significant increases over their traditional marketing spend. So the first question that I retort when someone says, "What's the ROI of content marketing?" is, "What's the ROI of marketing?" Right? So every organization that asks this question needs to first commit to measuring their marketing ROI. Once you do that, and that's no easy task, then you need to make sure that you're looking at comparing your content marketing ROI to the larger marketing effort. And like I said, in almost every case, we're not seeing percentage increases, we're seeing magnitudes. We're seeing 2x, 3x, 4x increases. Beth Comstock, CMO at GE, has this great quote of, why are you taking the shift away from paid media, from the promotion and advertising that GE has traditionally spent its money on, towards content marketing? And she said, because we're trying to shout louder than we spend. And what she means by that is that she's getting a greater ROI by building these owned content marketing assets and then shifting the distribution dollars into those higher performing pieces of content. So shouting louder than we spend means that she's getting more bang for the buck, if you will. And then if we look at in this poorly crafted GIF that I created, so the first GIF I ever created, so you got to bear with me, but this is the a sort of a moving picture of this shift that we're seeing. This is from Unilever, one of the largest advertisers in the entire world. And what you see from back in 2000, where 90% of their spend was in paid media, and 5% or so, they were sort of just dipping their toe in the water on earned and owned. And now we're seeing in 2010, 13% in earned media, and 7% in owned media. And what we're seeing now, Unilever, like many organizations, are moving what I call from paid through earned to owned. And what do I mean by that is that generally advertisers just simply shifted as social media became more important to each of us as content consumers. They shifted their promotional messages into Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Snapchat, what have you, and found that there was little to no engagement in those promotional messages. And so what they're finding, what we're all finding, is that when you start with owned media, and now Unilever's spending a larger portion of their money, and the significant increases happening there, and then from there shift their spend into paid, earned, and owned, into the paid and earned areas. Again, putting sort of the weight behind the arrow of their own media, of their content marketing efforts. Next slide. So we've talked, very, very high level, and tried to keep too many words on a page, but now we want to make sure that we're providing you with some real walkaways. And so if you want to take a screenshot, feel free. But steps for building the business case for content marketing. The most important and most impactful thing I've seen at companies large and small has been something as simple as the content audit. And so what is a content audit? A content audit simply inventories how much content you have, who's creating it, how much it costs, how much it's being used, and how effective it is. So, that's a big statement right there. There's a lot in that. But just starting with an inventory, just starting with what content do you have, apply some even average benchmark costs to, assumptions to how much you think that content may have cost. And then look at just simply how much of it's been used. And I know my experience at some large enterprise companies, we saw as much as, and I showed the stat earlier, as much as 60 to 70% of the content being created by marketing, being created even across the larger organization, is never even used. It never gets to its intended recipient or its audience. And so all of that, every single dollar or euro or pound spent creating that content that never reaches its intended audience, is complete waste. It's completely wasted. So before you even get to how effective your content is, you have to look at what's the cost and how much of it's being used. Second, cost per lead. And so we've seen some research from HubSpot that shows that leads created by inbound sources, which is largely content that attracts an audience in the form of owned media, in the form of content marketing, 60 to 70% cheaper than leads that are driven from outbound, whether that's cold calling, events, any kind of promotional marketing, traditional marketing efforts. So just looking at cost per lead from inbound versus outbound sources can provide the business case for why you need to shift more of your investment into content marketing. Another thing that we looked at when we do content audits is we often look at two things. Number one, what's the stage that content is being produced for, and what's the content type. So if you're doing a content inventory or audit, look at what content you have, map it to stage and type. And what you're going to find is that in every case where we've done one, there's a complete disconnect between the content that your organization produces and the content that, or the volume of content required by your audience. And so the picture of a funnel is a metaphor where in the early stage there are more people than in the later stages or in the conversion stages. And that metaphor exists for one simple reason, and that's to show you that there are more people at the top of the funnel than at the bottom. And yet, most of our content efforts are focused in the late stages, in the conversion efforts that we have as companies, talking about ourselves, talking about why we're better, and yet more people are asking bigger questions in the earlier stage. So look at how much search traffic you get. Look at how big that audience is. Look at the amount or the volume of searches that happen in the early stages versus, let's say, branded search terms for your company. So that's number three. Number four, what's the ROI content marketing relative to the rest of your marketing spend? So I already talked about this in the great quote from Kraft. But once you have any kind of measure towards your marketing ROI, towards the return on investment for your marketing spend overall, you can then begin to benchmark that between, let's say, content marketing and advertising, or content marketing and events. And so that's, again, sort of an obvious but yet somewhat challenging statement. And then finally, how much improvement can you see and can you achieve by shifting to a more balanced approach to paid, owned, and earned? And so I'm certainly not here to say that paid promotion is ineffective. There are certainly brands, including our own, that use paid promotion to quite positive effects. The point, though, is shifting the mentality from starting with paid through earned and into owned to one of creating, investing, and focusing on telling stories as a brand that meet your audience's needs, sharing that in social, so achieving earned and then taking the insights you're getting from that earn, from those digital signals that you get in social, and placing paid distribution behind those. So companies like Outbrain are a great example, and an extremely effective way of providing amplification of content that you have proven in your own social networks has been effective. A great quote here from the analyst firm IDC: the buyer journey is nothing more than a series of questions that must be answered. And so any company that does this, any company that maps out what questions its audience asks at each stage of the buying journey, as I mentioned, the metaphor of the funnel exists for a reason, to show that there are more people asking things like, what is this thing, this category of stuff you sell? How do I become expert at implementing or solving my problem with this thing? And then we get into questions like, who provides it? Why are they better? And so if you focus on answering those questions at the top of the funnel, moving then towards the middle, and then allowing your company to continue its expertise in why you're better, will allow you to meet the needs of the buyers along each stage of the journey. And then finally, this quote from Kevin Spacey, who famously delivered a presentation to about 2,500 people at Content Marketing World here in the US a couple of months ago. Your audience is looking for stories, and the challenge to brands is, will we give it to them? And so with that, I want to thank you for your time. We have, I think now, plenty of time for questions, so we're going to open it up. I'm actually going to pass it over to Alex and ask you to take on the first question, Alex.
Thank you very much, Michael. We're just going to very quickly go open up the questions, and here we go. What's the biggest pain point why marketers shift their budgets from traditional to content marketing? Perhaps, Michael, that would be a good one for you to answer, actually, with your experience.
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's one that, in fact, I think there was a study done by Forrester Research, Laura Ramos, if you don't know her, and Ryan O'Neill now sitting there in the UK office for Forrester. Really good question, and what we see is that CMOs, almost 90% of them, accept that they have no idea. They actually admit to being extremely fearful, aware of the fact that they need to change, but fearful of how to navigate that journey. And so the thing that we see is, number one, it starts with people. And so you've got to find and invest in the kinds of people talk about digital natives or millennials, and I think I always go back to HubSpot's definition of the kinds of people that they look to hire for in their marketing organization, and it's folks that understand digital, folks that can report on the digital signals that you get when you market in a digital fashion in this digital world that we live in, and who are able to attain reach and conversion with content. So any kid coming out of university knows how to throw up a picture on Instagram, and that may or may not meet the needs of their friends. But the challenge is when you work for a business and reaching people who may be less receptive to your message. How do you gain reach and conversion of them? So think about, that's a dark acronym: digital, analytical, able to obtain reach and conversion with content. So those would be the things I would recommend people focus on as they're looking to make that migration from, let's say, traditional to content marketing efforts. The other thing is this editorial mindset. Some people talk about looking at hiring journalists, and I think that can work for sure. But I think more importantly, it's just an editorial mindset has two things. It's the desire to create content people want and to resist that natural urge to promote. And number two is the ability to understand how to monetize that traffic. So that's the editorial mindset. So it's first, I think, focus on the skill sets inside your organization, hiring the right people, and second, looking for those that have that editorial mindset. Great. I'll take the second question. So yeah, if you could only measure one thing, what would it be? So I'll take a stab at that, Alex, and then I'd love to hear your thoughts as well. One thing that we found when I was at SAP, we found it's kind of like the Thomas Edison quote of how he found 100 ways not to make a light bulb before he found the one way that worked. At SAP, I found 100 ways to get conversion wrong. We thought people would move from, let's say, an early stage blog post like, what is big data, to please SAP tell me how I can buy your big data solutions. And we were I mean, it's obvious after the fact, but we tested a lot of different methods for how to get people who were consuming our content and engaging with our content to then convert. What we found, and to answer the question, was that we offered sort of conversion paths for sure on the site. Click to call to talk to a sales representative, or click here to register for a white paper. But what we found was that it was subscribers. So just getting people offering a subscription to the content itself, a total low barrier sales proposition. That was really the key. That the folks that subscribed were 10 times more likely to convert to something else that we could value as a business than anything else that we could do. So for me, I would say subscriptions is the one thing I would measure. Alex, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. So it's probably pretty similar to you. The most valuable metric for us, and I'd say this is the kind of marketer's gold, is repeat visits. Like if you're getting that right, you're in a good space. We all talk about the long-term strategy around content marketing, but the fact of the matter is, there's never a right or a wrong time for somebody to come across and buy your product. But if you're able to support them the entire time that they're thinking, or they're not aware, etc., and you're able to add value, then that repeat visit metric is really, really important. So if you can figure out which of the kind of content you're creating is driving those repeat visits, and which is keeping them engaged and coming back to your site, then that for me is certainly one of the most powerful metrics that you have out there.
Mm-hmm. Great.
I have another question actually here from Ariel King. So how do you measure content marketing ROI where the point of sale is offline? So this is a great question. Keep your fingers crossed and hope is one answer. And for example, we do a lot of work with Colgate, and Colgate have an amazing site. It's called the Colgate World of Oral Care. If you haven't seen it, you should go on it. They have over, I think, 700 articles, not about how white they can get your teeth or about how fresh they can get your breath, but stuff that adds value. How to prevent your children from getting cavities, how to brush your kids' teeth, that kind of stuff that is really educational, really informative. And Colgate's committed to this strategy because they know that when someone's pushing the trolley down the aisle of a supermarket and they come to the counter where there's hundreds of different types of toothpaste, all brightly colored, they'll choose Colgate because they've created that relationship, they've formed trust, and they've added value. And if you need some harder metrics, then we've seen some really interesting success when you partner up. So you could potentially partner up with a credit card company, run a promotion with them, and then you can start to track the data via the card usage. Teaming up with somebody like Foursquare as well can kind of give you another indication of a way to track online and offline. A really simple way, and you'll see this with a lot of FMCG brands, is couponing. So creating some really great content around, recipes, for example, and then at the bottom of that, having a download the recipe with a voucher for, 5% off. And you can then have a little registration around that, or you can just have the voucher. And then having that at the check-in will then allow you to demonstrate that this piece of content or this type of content is increasing redemptions. It's not an exact science. We're not where we need to be. But there are some short-term tactics, such as I said, printing it out, partnering up with a third party that's got that kind of offline reach, even loyalty cards. So, going with, the Boots or the Walgreens cards, tying up with somebody else, that can help you to create that journey and actually loop back in again. I have another question. So, where were we? Oh, here we go. How do you create great stories that aren't all about brands, but draw enough connection to get good return on investment? So this is certainly, and I'd love to once again hear Michael's opinion on this, but this is all around the customer insight, and it's figuring out what type of content should I be creating, and actually, more importantly, what areas can I play in? And so from a strategy perspective, you've probably got your own customer data, you've got your search keywords that can provide you some kind of element of where you should play in from an intent perspective. You've got your social listening that will have your customer's voice. And equally with partners like Outbrain, we have all of the content information. We understand what content people are consuming in different areas, so we can potentially pull out some topic insight that can become the kind of third leg to that stool. And then essentially what you want to be doing is combining those together to either validate some of the decisions that you're already making, but actually more importantly, identifying different opportunities from what your customers actually want. So in a nutshell, it's down to the insight piece at the very beginning. Michael?
Yeah, I would agree. I would totally agree. I think we often talk about uh, audience graph and interest graph, and taking a content delivery approach based on both. And what I mean by that is, in the audience graph, find out who is influential to the people you're trying to reach, and in some cases that may or may not be related to the things that are something that your brand might be associated with. But for example, we power Pepsi.com, and Pepsi as a brand is trying to be known for really being hip and up to date. And the way that they do that is by delivering content that's associated with the entertainment industry and the things, the hot artists and the hot celebrities that are important to their audience. And so they're looking at who is influential to their target audience. So that's from an audience graph perspective. And there's ways, like you said, Alex, to get that information in a variety of different formats. What I think is even more interesting is the interest graph. So, and it's kind of like that Venn diagram I showed in the definition of content marketing, where there is an overlap. It's not a complete overlap, but there's an overlap between what you as a brand care about and the place we sort of have in this world, and the audience that we're trying to reach. Right? There's an overlap of some form. Otherwise, we wouldn't exist as a commercial business. And so it's really sort of more art probably than science, but trying to figure out what is the overlap there in the interest graph between your business and in many cases it comes down to your values and your mission statement. We were talking to a fast-moving consumer goods company a couple of weeks ago, and it's a brand you'd all know and love, and I'll just sort of keep it confidential for now. But my sort of advice to them was, you feed the world. You're providing nourishment that most people really love, and so that's their mission. And there's an obvious overlap between the people that are consuming the foods that they create and manufacture, and what the brand itself is producing and why the brand exists as a business. And so there's certainly things that I think every brand can find where there's that overlap, that reason for existing, the reason that you have successful commercial relationships, and finding what that overlap is between both audience and interest.
There's another question here. Could you give us an example of a success story of a company which migrated from traditional marketing to content marketing? I don't think just to kind of to set some start to that. I don't think it's an all or nothing. Content marketing is a strategy that you can use within your overall marketing. I'd love to reframe the question and say, in 5 years' time, will there be any successful businesses that aren't using effective content marketing? And I think with that in mind, I'd like to say no. I think that content marketing is one of the greatest way to create engagement, trust in the digital age. In terms of success stories, I don't know the full history, but there's a few companies that I really love and I think are doing an incredible job at content marketing. I'm not going to go Red Bull. I'm not going to say Coke. I really love Will It Blend. I think they're an amazing business. They created blenders that were really high price, and they had a trouble selling themselves because they were so expensive. And then they decided to create a series of videos with their founder who dressed up with a white lab coat and drop in expensive products. So when the iPhone first came out, they dropped the iPhone in, videoed it as a 30-second clip, and they completely blended the iPhone, which demonstrated the power of the product. So I really love Will It Blend. And the other one that I think is doing an incredible job is GoPro. I think they've got an amazing product. They're really lucky because they're able to play in this kind of really visual, extreme environment. But those are two brands that I think are doing an outstanding job. Michael, maybe you want to close off with some examples from your side.
Yeah, I mean the one that really inspired us at SAP was American Express Open Forum, which maybe I know they're certainly moving in a quicker way into the European market. But they created a site for small business, and the mission was for small business to do more business. The site was off property, heavily branded, but the content was completely helpful. It was purely about how small business owners can drive their business forward, and answered every single question a small business might ever have. How to incorporate? How do you start managing payroll? How do you hire effectively? How do you do point of sale? How do you do online right? And so they did a great job, I think, and spent a lot of money actually over many years trying to perfect what they were doing. And now Open Forum, they claim, is the #1 source for leads for their new cardholders. So it's kind of an often used example here in the States, but one that really inspired, I think, a lot of folks. And now we're seeing a tremendous amount of maturity, especially in the financial services industry, largely driven by, I think, the leadership that American Express Open Forum delivered. So if you're looking for an example, you can look right there. I think another example that inspired us at SAP was Adobe's CMO.com, which is kind of alternatively from American Express, almost completely unbranded site. And what I think CMO.com is trying to do, and as marketers, certainly tremendous amounts of thought leadership there. What they're trying to do is basically build a relationship and be helpful and build up their subscriber list. Back to my answer on the one metric question, building up a subscriber list so that they can market eventually to, I think, their subscribers. So CMO, Adobe CMO.com, I think, is a great example. I think Kraft, I use Julie Fleischer's example. Kraft is probably the most traditional and longest sort of running traditional content marketer that I'm aware of, at least in the online or digital space. And they have a number of properties that are specifically targeted towards their target audience. And so they've been spending a lot of time, I think, documenting and showing. The interesting stat about that 4x quote Julie Fleischer mentioned was that it's not 4x their overall marketing spend, it's 4x their targeted marketing spend. So they're actually looking for the best of what they do in digital marketing, and they're comparing content marketing to that, and that's where they're seeing 4x. So think about content marketing versus retargeted banner ads, for example. So they're 4x even the best that they can do utilizing data in the digital marketplace. So great example, I think, from Kraft. Red Bull is another obvious example that most people use. GoPro is a great one. Will It Blend, Alex, another good one. We also Capgemini, based out of Paris, with the content loop, is something that NewsCred powers. A great example of a company that shifted in a big way, took a big bet, and is now providing it's a real continuous loop between they're sharing valuable content in their LinkedIn channels, they're reaching new people, they're bringing them back to a brand experience, and they're driving them directly towards the consultants in the various verticals that they own. So it's a direct demand or lead generation approach using content marketing. So all some good examples there.
Thank you, Michael. So unfortunately, we've run out of time for this session. However, both myself and Michael are really keen to answer any additional questions that you have. So you have our Twitter handles, you have an email. Please feel free to send through your comments, questions, etc. Michael, thank you very much for taking part in the first Outbrain webinar in the UK. We're running a poll because we intend to roll these out frequently. So if you're able to vote for what you'd like next, we'll be following up shortly with a link to the webinar, some key takeaways, and with the date for the follow-on webinar. So thank you very much for attending. We hope to see you next time.